Welcome to the first episode of the Enterprise Season 1 OnPrem. In this episode, we're going to go over the initial setups for our enterprise-like platform or system. The first thing that we're going to do is create a Git repo, or not really a Git repo, but more of a Git project and a Git repo, because we need a place to save our code and all the stuff that we need to go to. This will be accessible to all of you, and you can track what we do in real time. And if you watch the group close enough, you can see how things are going to progress in the future videos. So you can kind of get a window into the future, if you may. The first thing we're going to put in there is a simple Hello World API. Just want to start something very simple so that we can watch it expand just for something simple, and then we can expand on that, making it more and more complex. So without further ado, we can get started. And so right now I am in a terminal on my Mac. You can follow along in Windows or Linux or whatever suits your fancy. Before we even do anything here, let's actually take a look at GitLab. So when thinking about which Git repo or platform you want to put your code in, and if you don't understand Git, that's fine. I'm going to show you the basics on how to start a project up. You really have a choice between applications or services really, like GitLab, GitHub, Bitbucket. Bitbucket you mostly don't hear about. GitHub is the number one that you mostly hear about for open source projects. If it's something online, most likely you'll hear, oh, GitHub. GitHub does have GitHub Actions. But I find for what we're going to be doing in this video, GitLab works a lot well. It had GitLab CI, or their own little CI/CD pipeline stuff, before GitHub had GitHub Actions, so they're more mature in this space. A lot of enterprises use GitLab. Actually, the enterprises that I've dealt with were on GitHub. They migrated over to GitLab because they needed a CI/CD solution. They didn't want to use Jenkins. They didn't want to use their own custom solution. So GitLab to the rescue. So once you've created an account, you can go over to here where it says groups. You can see a list of groups I've already owned. So this is, you can see with the lock, it's a private group. Don't try to access it. You won't be able to. But we can go here, select new groups, create group. And then what are we going to call this? We're going to call this Tomco Tech. We can call it Tomco-Tech. It's really up to you of what you want to call it. I think I'm just going to keep it without any sort of dash. And then I'm just going to copy it up here. And here I can add a space if I wanted to, or I can not. It's up to you. I'm just going to keep it all lowercase for now. Then we have to do visibility level. You have your choice between public and private. I'm going to do it for public so you all can follow along and watch my changes as things go on. It will be primarily just me. And why do I want this group for? I want to go with a different reason. So I'm going to create this group. And now I'm in a fresh group, brand new group. If you want to access it, you can go to gitlab.com/tomcotech. And you can see all of our projects. So the first thing that we're going to do is create a new project. And I find it's easier going this way. There are some Git commands that you can do, such as initiating a repo and going that route. And then you can connect a remote repository to your local repository. There's a lot of commands there. To make things a little bit easier, we're just going to do everything in the UI first. So the first thing that we can do is write a simple hello world application. I always like the project name to match the project slug. And so we're going to do a hello world, and this is a microservice. So hello world -ms. Project deployment target. I can pick whatever one I want here. We're just going to ignore this. We're going to add our own stuff. And again, I want this public so that you can all see this. When I initiate a README, and a README is a markdown file. I can create this and show you. A markdown file that shows kind of like getting started, how to add your files, integrate your code, and all of this kind of stuff, like how do you use your application. And these are the commands I was kind of talking about, where you'd go to your existing repo, you'd go git remote add, because this is a remote repository, origin, and you're setting the origin or the main remote target to be this path right here. And then we want to change the branch to main. And then we want to just push that integration. We don't have to do that. We made it here. We have a README. What we can do now is we can either clone with SSH or clone with HTTPS. SSH, you would have to go into your global settings. So if I go to preferences, I can go to SSH keys, and I can do our stuff or do our connections here. This right here is public. It doesn't give you the real key, and you can revoke, you can add new key, you can put your stuff here. If you don't know how to add, you can click right here to learn more, and it'll walk you through how to do that, where it's all located at. If you want a more in-depth tutorial on how to do that, and even an expiration date, I can help guide you in that direction. But we're just going to go back to Tomco Tech, and you can see our Hello World microservice. And I'm going to go clone, and I'm going to do it with SSH. I'm going to go back to our repo, or back to our terminal, and I can go git clone, and I can paste this down. And now I am SSHing into Git. I'm pulling everything down. I can then CD into Hello World microservice, or MS, and we can see we're in our default branch. So next thing we're going to do is I'm going to go into our newly created repository. I am using ZSH for my shell. I am using ZSH for kind of like a theme. So that's where you can see the plugins. If you would like a terminal like setup guide, I can do that. Just let me know in the comments below, and I can create one up for you. So I'm also using VS Code. You can use Vim. You can do whatever you want. I'm using VS Code with the code extension. So I can go code dot and open up the new repo. And I don't need to update VS Code right now. And we can see all of our files here. I can go up here and go to new terminal. So now we're in the part of we have a blank repo. All we have is the markdown file. How do we go from this to making a microservice? So we can do this in many different languages. My favorite is NodeJS, and my go-to way of installing NodeJS is using NVM, or Node Version Manager. And you can find that in github.com/nvm-sh/nvm. This is a tool to manage the different versions of Node, because you may have project 1, which is on Node 20, project 2 might be in Node 16, project 3 might be in Node 22, and to switch between the different versions, it would be very easy to have a tool. It should be more useful to have a tool. And anytime I install a programming language, I try to use some sort of version management system. So if you don't have this already, you can just copy this line right here and it will install and you can follow the instructions. I already have it on my computer, so I can go NVM, I can go help to see a list of options that I have. And while this isn't a tutorial on NVM, I wanted to at least talk about it a little bit. And so I can go NVM version. You can see the version of NVM that I'm using. You can also do NVM ls-remote to see a list of what versions of Node are available for your current system. And I can see that the LTS for Iron, which is Node version 20's code name, is here. The blues are the ones I have currently installed on my system. The green is the latest version, or it's the default version that I point to automatically. I always want to use the latest version available, that is LTS. So I'm just going to go NVM install 22.14.0 and wait for a little bit. And now if I go to node-v, we now have the latest version. So the first file that we're going to add is if we go node-v, we can use the greater than sign and put this content of version 22.14.0 into a file called nvmrc. Now what nvmrc is it's just a file containing the Node version. And why is this important or useful? You can go nvm use and it looks for an nvmrc file and it just uses that version. So if I go to nvm use, let's say 20, I'm now using Node version 20.17.0 because I already had that version installed. It was the latest one I had installed actually. And I can go node-v and I can see that, hey, I'm on an older version of Node. If I go to nvm use, it'll look for that nvmrc file. And now I'm using 22.14 because that's what the file says. So you can bounce around the different Node versions very easily. The next thing we're going to do is just do an npm init, and I'll walk you through the different steps first. You could also just do a -y and auto accept everything. But if you didn't, you can do a hello world.ms, and that's just the repo's name. It takes that as the default for the package name. That's fine by me. Version of the Node application is 1. That's fine. Description, a simple hello world microservice. Entry point can be index.js. That's fine. Test command. We're not going to have anything for testing right this second, but we will. I can just leave that blank. The Git repository we can keep there. Keywords, I can have blank. Author, I can just put my name. License, it's fine. This is a preview of what the file is going to look like. This looks good. The default is yes. I can hit return. And it creates a package.json file. And all of the different things that we selected, you can see right here. The next thing that we want to do is add a start, which would be node index.index.js. And then I want to do a dev. And then in the past, there was an application called NodeMon. And what NodeMon will let you do is it would automatically restart your application when changes were detected. It doesn't necessarily need to be for a Node application because you can have it look for Python files. You can have it look for any certain type of file you want. So this is an example with Python. And Node.js, or the team that created Node.js, looked at that, looked how useful that was, added it into Node, I think since version 19, or not 19, but since version 16 or 18. I don't remember which one, so don't hold me to it. But long story short, I can go node -- watch and then index.js. And I can use that native Node feature now instead of having to install another dependency. I'd rather use native things. And so next thing we're going to do is we're going to make a new index file, basically. So I can do touch index, which I misspelled index, so let me try that again. And delete the old file. And I can also go up here and make new files. It's just faster than making a terminal application. And then I can go in here and I can go console.log hello world. And if I go npm start, it will show me hello world. And where start comes from is the script right here. So one would think that I should be able to go nvm dev, and dev isn't there. So there are certain scripts that by default have a shortcut. Start is one of them, test is one of them, dev is not. So what you would have to do is nvm run dev in order to get that working. And I can do, at least on my Mac, Control-C. I think that's the same for Windows. And I can exit the program, and there we have it. Hello world. I can also do npm run start to show the same thing. I'm going to go back to dev and work primarily in dev because I like to have a model where I am writing changes and then seeing them update in real time. So if I just add an exclamation mark to this in dev mode, I can see that it is now there. I can add an @ symbol. I save it. And I can see my changes are instantly there. The one bad thing with, I'm going to call it dev mode, is you can't install libraries, so you have to stop the application and install what you need. The main thing that we're going to need to add is Express, which is a API layer framework that makes making APIs easy. So I can do npm install Express. The -- save means put it in your dependencies. There is two different types of dependencies for Node. There is your normal dependencies, and then there's dev dependencies. Dev dependencies is normally used for your testing purposes. In this case, we don't need them, so we can just use the default, which is -- save. And so npm install Express. And I can see that there is now a package lock file, which tells Node behind the scenes of which versions to install and where they're coming from. You can see the Node modules, which has all the things that we need. That's a black hole. And then in package, you can see we have a new dependency called Express. This little caret simply means that anything for.xxx install. So it doesn't necessarily need to be this version. It's just this version on up to 4.99999 repeating. So now that we have Express, we can start our very first Express application. And we can just copy what they have here and start from there. I'm going to go npm run dev again. And we can see our application is listing on port 3000. So what are ports? Imagine a server that you're connecting to with your computer. Normally you'd simply type in a website like example.com, but what if there's another application on that same server you want to reach? Maybe it's a blog, or perhaps your app is running on port 3000. You could even be accessing a profile section of the website, which is on a different application entirely. In fact, you could have all three of these simultaneously. There are three main methods to direct traffic to different applications on a single server: by domain or subdomain, by port, or by path. But what exactly are ports? Picture your home is at 221B Baker Street in London. While the address, 221 Baker Street, gets your mail to the right building, the B tells the postman which unit to deliver to. Similarly, a port number tells your data exactly which unit or application on the server should handle your request. Now let's take a quick tour of some common ports. Port 20, FTP, used for moving files. Port 22, for secured shell. For securely remote access. Port 80 is the standard for unencrypted web traffic. Port 443, used for encrypted web traffic. Port 3000, though not a standard port, it's popular for Node.js, React, and Grafana applications. Port 5432 is a typical port for PostgreSQL, a widely used SQL database. Ports 8080 and 8443 often serve as alternates for 80 and 443 respectively to avoid conflicts with other applications. These are just a small subset of available ports, the most common standards. Technically, you could use port 42 for HTTPS or 777 for SSH. By sticking to the standards, it keeps things running smoothly. So in essence, ports are like doorbells on a vast digital mansion, each one ensuring your request rings the right door for the right application. Now we get to use our application. It doesn't say exactly how, but we can open up a browser and type in localhost port 3000, and we can see our application has sent us to Hello World. There are many different applications that we can do this with. Your browser can only do get calls by default. So what I like to use is an application called Postman. This is Postman. And what you can do is go to localhost port 3000, and we can see our Hello World here again. So what happens with our application? So we are importing our required module Express, and then we are using Express as the function. So it returns a function or an alias for a function. We're now calling that function. The results of that will be app. We are going to be using port 3000. With the Express app, we're going to make a get call to slash. Remember in Postman we just had a slash. And then the second part is a callback function. It takes in two parameters, request and response. Request is the call that you initially make to Postman, and we are not, aside from just doing a, hey, I want to get information, we're not really using the option. We are using response. And our response is we are sending hello world, as you saw in our Postman example. The last part is we are listening to port 3000, and then this is our next callback function. We're not taking in any parameters, and simply what this is saying is, hey app, listen to port 3000. Once you're listening, once you're working, call your callback. And in our callback, we're just logging out example application is listening on port 3000. Hence, you can see in the terminal down here. And this just tells us that, hey, our application is ready to be used, and we can now go to localhost port 3000. The last thing that we're going to do is we're going to save our work. And for that, we need to have two things. One, if we just do the normal git commands to save our work, we're going to save this node modules folder. You never want to store a node module folder because it's files that you can easily reproduce using package.json. So as part of a node project, we always want to use a file that's called .gitignore. And that is mistyped. .gitignored. And this will just say whatever in this file we want to ignore when we do git commands. So we're going to go over here and just do git ignore generator. And I think this is the one I'm looking for. Yes. I will have this in the documentations descriptions below. And all you need to do is just say, hey, I'm working on a node project. And then what's my operating system? In this case, I have Mac OS, but if you're doing Windows, you can do Windows. If you have Linux, you can just do Linux. And you can go from there. So I'm just going to select NodeJS and Mac. And what's nice about this is it auto-generates the gitignore for you so that you don't have to do it. And going through this, we have all the normal log files for the various node projects, runtime information if your application uses it, if you do any sort of unit testing or coverage testing, which we'll cover later. It'll have that already. Here's our node modules that we're looking at. If you're using TypeScript, all of that stuff is here. Even Next.js stuff, if you would, or serverless or Dynamo or anything else node related. And then we have the Apple stuff like your .ds store file, etc. So we're just going to copy this whole thing and just paste it in here. And then we can go git. And now I want to add all of the existing files. So to see what files need to be added and what the state of things look like, you can do git status, and it will show you all the untracked files. It has noticed that I have now the gitignore file, so you can see that node modules is grayed out, and we're not seeing it in untracked files. So then I want to add everything. So I can go add dot, which will just add everything. If I've deleted things, it won't be covered with the dot. So what I like to do is just /a for just everything or all. And if I go to git status again, you can see everything is now green. Everything has been committed. And then we want to go git commit m for message. If you don't have anything deleted, if you don't have any new files, you're just modifying existing files, then you can do an AM instead of the initial add -a. But we don't need the -a at this point. So then next, you just can do either initial commit. Is typically what I normally do, since this is the first commit that I do. And for sake of the video, I'm going to call it something different. In this case, I can do created basic template, maybe because it is a basic template of what we need. And then you can see everything has been created, so we can then go get status. And so my version of Git on my local machine is one commit ahead of our remote repository. So we just need to push to that. Git status. You can see that everything is up to date. If I go to Git over here and I refresh, you can see that my changes are live here, and voila. In the next video, we're going to pick up where we left off and turn this into a more enterprise-ready API. We're going to go over the structure of the project, and we're going to make it a little bit more robust and add various other features.